I remember walking in a store back in 2012 and seeing a certain Wii game on the shelf. The game stood out to me for the beautifully simplistic cover art, but I forgot what it was called. Later I learned that it was called The Last Story. I remember reading reviews and hearing that it was supposed to be a really good RPG. I would keep bumping into it from time to time over the years, but never committed to buying it because I was waiting for the price to go down. Eventually, when I started collecting the Operation Rainfall games, I learned that The Last Story was one of them and probably wasn't getting any cheaper. Of course, when I decided to buy it, I couldn't find it anywhere. I took a 45-minute road trip to a store and bought it before the price started going up. So after years of this game sitting in the back of my head, I finally had the chance to play it. I knew almost nothing about the game going into it, so I didn't know what to expect. I heard it was made by the creator of the Final Fantasy series, Hironobu Sakaguchi, and we all know how much I love the Final Fantasy series. Well, whatever. After years of curiosity, I'm finally ready. Let's take a look at The Last Story. The Last Story takes place on Lazarus Island, where our main character Zale travels with a mercenary group led by his best friend Dagran. During a mission in some caves, Zale encounters a mysterious force and receives a brand on his hand, granting him magical powers. After surviving the caves, the mercenaries return to Lazarus City, where they take up shelter in a local bar, awaiting further instructions from their employer, who happens to be the current Count of Lazarus Island. While on an errand in town, Zale runs into a young woman who is later revealed to be the current heir to the Lazarus throne, Callista. The two form a bond, but Zale learns that Callista is in an arranged marriage with a snobby prick named Jarrell. During Callista's wedding, Lazarus Island is attacked by the Garak, a race banished from Lazarus by humans and now united under their new ruler, Zangarak. Zale and his group are now thrown into the middle of a war between the humans and the Garak. After this attack, Zale learns that the brand he received gave him something called the Power of the Outsider. This power is something highly desired by Count Arganan. The Count offers Zale his lifelong dream of becoming a knight should he serve the Empire, but it could end up costing Zale his happiness, or even worse, his life. On the surface, the story doesn't sound that bad, but the more you progress, the less you find. It goes the typical JRPG route of becoming more and more complicated as the story progresses, but it's not interesting enough to make you care. By the end, it really becomes a convoluted mess. There are times in the story where questions are asked about morality, but they are almost never followed through with. For example, at one point in the game, Zale leads an attack on the Garak Island and is forced to see innocent women and children be murdered. Zale doesn't like this, and that's it. The game wants to show us the consequences of war, but doesn't follow through with the solution. It barely follows it up with even a conversation. The story is also very slow moving for a while, and it's not like this is a very long RPG, as I beat it in under 25 hours, but it moves very slow and then speeds up tenfold in almost a millisecond. One of the reasons it feels slow moving is because there are 2 points in the game where your main character is framed for a crime by the same person and put in the same jail cell. It literally repeats itself. The second time doesn't even make any sense because at this point in the game, Zale is in really good standing with the Count, and the Count can overrule the person who put Zale in prison, yet we are forced to do a mission where Zale has to sneak out and prove his innocence. There's a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like early in the game, a character takes a fatal shot to the chest, but then they're fine. But then later in the game, the same exact thing happens to someone else, but oh, nope, that person's dead. The story also lacks originality, as the origins of the Outsider and its effect on the world really isn't that different from Genova in Final Fantasy VII. I get that the games have the same creator, but the recycled elements are a little too on the nose this time around. One of the major driving forces of the story is that the life is being sucked from the planet, but we never see this firsthand. We see all the war and chaos, but we never really see the reason why they are fighting, so this conflict feels empty because it's hard to sympathize with either side. It's also confusing because there's a side quest where you can plant crops. Well, if the land is dying, how are my crops growing? It's such a hollow aspect of the game. That's the main problem with the story. It all just feels empty. They do their best to make it feel important, but it lacks real consequence. Every time Lazarus Island is attacked, it's pretty much all fixed in the next cutscene, so what's the point in caring when it seems like nothing is really being lost or is at stake? It's just shallow. It's not a terrible story, but it's your average JRPG kind of plot. Nothing more, nothing less. One of the biggest weaknesses in the last story is the characters. Absolutely none of these characters are very interesting. They are tropes first and characters second. They aren't awful or annoying characters, but there's nothing to them. They don't really grow, they don't really change. They are the same characters at the beginning of the game as they are at the end of the game. Let's go over all of them. Like our main character Zale. His character traits are... he's the protagonist. He's an average good guy, he doesn't like killing things, he wants to be a knight, and... that's it. He has a tragic backstory where his family was murdered by bandits, but it's only brought up a few times really. That's kind of all there is to him. I'm not against simple protagonists in games. Ike from Fire Emblem is a wonderful protagonist with fairly simple morals, but Ike was also interesting. Zale just isn't. There's no point in the game where Zale does anything you wouldn't have predicted. He's just average. Callista, the heir to the throne, is also fairly simple, but the game loves to make her look like she is complex. While it's true her life isn't the happiest, she's certainly not very complex. One thing I do like is that she is a proactive character. She joins your party and is pretty competent in it. She kind of reminds me of Princess Garnet from Final Fantasy IX, but less mischievous and less compelling. The rest of the heroes are simple archetypes. Sarin is the brash drunk type. Lowell is the hopeless ladies man. Miranya is the quiet and reserved bookworm, and Yurik is the brooding loner. They are all pretty simple archetypes. To Yurik's credit though, his emo phase is actually refreshingly brief. He goes through an arc and does change a bit, more so than most of the other characters. He doesn't really stand out past his own short side quests, but I'm glad they gave him something other than just being my least favorite archetype in JRPGs. This group of mercenaries is led by Dagran, who is probably the most interesting one out of all of them, but for story reasons, he's not around as much as the others to a point where it almost feels like the game forgot about him. I'll go more into him later though. Those are all of the heroes. They have some fun interactions with each other, but it's mostly just playing off of their tropes. They're just there. The same can be said about our villains. Count Arganin is Callista's power-hungry uncle. He looks like Dracula from Symphony of the Night, but mixed with that boss from Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law. He is your typical corrupt ruler. He wants nothing but power and will do anything to achieve it, even if it results in collateral damage for his own nation. He has a deep-rooted hatred for the Garak, which is ironic because the Garak leader, Zangarak, is essentially the same character. His design isn't very original either. He looks like Ganondorf and Zant had a baby. He's almost exactly the same as Count Arganin, but benefits a little bit by there being more mystery to him. But this is largely because he isn't as present as Arganin. And like Arganin, he just wants power. Him maybe a little more so, as he is even more willing to sacrifice the lives of his own people to achieve it. The game makes it seem like Zangarak is going to be the main villain, but he really isn't. He's just another person looking for power. He has no real screen presence either. It almost feels like he could not even be in this game at times. He's not totally evil because the game shows that he does care about his people to a certain degree, but it's only shown once and after he's already let countless civilians die, so it feels tacked on. I guess the final villain to bring up is Callista's fiancé Jarell. He's pretty much this game's Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. No, the good Beauty and the Beast. However, unlike Gaston, he is shown to be an abusive prick from the start and has no courage as he runs from conflict the moment it happens. The later part of the game shows him slowly losing his sanity due to his extreme hatred for Zale, which would be more interesting if they interacted more. Most of it is based on the fact that Zale is a mercenary and not a noble, which is a bit cliche and a bit tiring. He's never intimidating, but his obsession and descent into madness does make him a bit more interesting than either Arganin or Zangarak. So those are all of the major characters, and like I said, none of them are terrible, but none of them are engaging. With the exception of Miranya, all the heroes' voice acting is good, and their designs are distinct and memorable. The actual artwork for this game is great, and I wish you could view some of the concept art in the game itself, because these designs do look better on paper. I also really like that the heroes are fairly customizable. You can dress them all in a variety of different outfits and change the colors of them, but getting dyes is really unclear. I went the whole game without getting anything for the effects part of the dye menu, and that's some bullshit. Why do I need ingredients? Why can't I just buy dye from the store like in other RPGs like Fable 2? Also, why is Dagran wearing the same outfit as Sarin? Why, Dagrin, you dirty little girl. Another thing about the characters is that other than the arena, you almost never get to pick who is in your party. The game picks who's in it. It makes your party unbalanced because there's a large chunk of the game where you don't have Serin or Lowell, and when you get them back, they are almost 15 levels behind. It's ridiculous. I don't know why you can't choose your party. Then again, you can have up to 7 characters in your party. I'd be okay with being restricted to having 3 or 4 characters at some point, as long as I could pick them. Regardless, you probably won't be connecting with the heroes that much. Like I said, they aren't captivating, nor are they annoying. They are just tools to move the story along. I don't normally cover graphics, but I briefly wanted to touch on this because one of the few things that I heard about this game was that the graphics were bad. But I think the graphics are great. Sure, they seem poor compared to the Xbox 360 and PS3, but this game is on the Wii, which is not nearly as powerful as those consoles. Of course it's not going to look as nice. You can't really look at the graphics from a 7th gen point of view on a console that's more on par with 6th gen. And by 6th gen standards, the graphics are great. The environments are nicely detailed, as are the character models. They all look nice. What doesn't look nice is the animations. The animations are pretty hideous. The characters' faces don't move sometimes, leading to a lot of ventriloquism in the cutscenes, and they look stiff and awkward. It's not so bad when it comes to explosion effects and magic attacks, but the character animations are awful and really take you out of the game. I think this is what led to so many graphical complaints because it is really jarring at times. And it's not like they couldn't have animated the characters better. I think this is a case where the hardware held them back from their ambitions, but the developers should have worked better within their limitations. My suggestion would just be to do away with the voice acting and add text boxes. This would make these single face animations far less unappealing. This is what a 6th gen game like Skies of Arcadia did, and it worked out wonderfully there. It could have worked here, but I guess they were afraid to release an adventure game without voice acting as late as 2012. But Skyward Sword did it, and it worked out fine there. So I understand the complaints in regards to the visuals, but it's not the graphics, it's the animation of the graphics. There's a lot of annoyance in the audio though, because your party will repeat themselves constantly in boss battles so you can figure out how to beat the boss. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't so frequent. It becomes so aggravating because they won't shut the fuck up.
Zale, can't you try and take a cut at its head? Get to the landings at the site. Zale, can't you try and take a cut at its head? Get to the landings at the site. Zale, can't you try and take a cut at its head? Get to the landings at the site. Zale, can't you try and take a cut at its head? Get to the landings at the site.
This was one of the most annoying aspects, and it made difficult boss battles even more frustrating because I'm getting yelled at over and over again. And when you have repeating lines with ugly animations, it just makes the game look like something from 2002, not 2012. If you don't mind that, great. I normally wouldn't, but the repetitive dialogue killed a decent amount of enjoyment for me. This game was composed by Final Fantasy veteran Nobuo Uematsu. While he is one of my favorite composers in gaming, this isn't his best work. The quality of the music is on par with the rest of the game. The title menu theme Toberu Mono sounds like a more somber version of Final Fantasy IX's title theme. It's not that shocking considering Uematsu composed 9, and Final Fantasy IX is Sakaguchi's personal favorite. The music in this game is nice, but not very memorable. Some of the standout tracks are Bonds, When Hearts Connect, and Order and Chaos. The track Tone of the Town reminds me a lot of Summer Fields from Fable. It goes without saying that the music is well composed, but I'd be lying if I said a lot of these tracks stuck with me. This game also does the always popular angelic voice singing over gentle instrumentals cliche. But here, it really doesn't work. We don't get lyrics, we get humming. It's not very good. It kind of kills the mood. I'm not sure why they went with this when there is a version of the song with lyrics at the end of the game, and it sounds great. It's really good, but it's basically wasted, so that sucks. The action themes do a good job of making you feel like you're in the middle of something epic, and the battle theme does kick ass. It's weird, the soundtrack is obviously good, but it just doesn't resonate too much with me, so it's hard to take my word on it. I would suggest giving it a listen yourself. The world of the last story is nothing special. The main hub of the game is Lazarus City. Here you can shop, battle in the arena, and undertake side quests. The city is very nice looking, but it's not really that big. The game seems to think it's big though, because it offers fast travel to different parts of the city, which seems kind of redundant because more often than not, it's quicker to just run to the area instead of waiting for the game to load it through fast travel. Lazarus Island also has many of the same shops scattered throughout the city in an effort to make shopping more convenient, which is nice, but again, the city isn't that big, so it's not really needed. You can do side quests in town. Some of them are kinda cool, but some of them are pretty lame. In one mission, you can rescue a little girl from some crazy cult, but in another, you're just shooting some chick in the town square with a love arrow. And there are the usual fetch quests as well. There's also the arena, but this thing is just flat out broken. It is so easy to exploit this. The arena is incredibly easy and very short. You get gold every time you beat it, which isn't that hard at all. Not to mention all the gold you get from the monsters that you fight. You also gain a really easy experience. Every now and then the arena gets a bit harder, but it's still easy as shit, and I don't think I ever died in it. The arena is in the marketplace of the town, and I cannot understand this area for the life of me. The whole idea of it is that you buy items from one shop to sell to another for profit, but making money in this game is so ridiculously easy that there's no point in this. Why would you walk back and forth between shops buying and selling the same things for money when you can just fight in the arena for money and level up your characters? So I didn't bother with the trading stuff. And that's really kind of it for the city. Sure, there's the castle, but there's almost nothing to do there other than the plot. You spend a lot of time in the castle, which really makes you feel closed in, and I don't want to feel that in an adventure game. Almost all of the other areas in the game are mission levels. Sure, you can go back and visit these areas for extra items, but they are still pretty linear, and I didn't really see a point in it. Getting items isn't hard, and getting money is even less difficult, so why bother? The world isn't very fleshed out. It's your typical JRPG kingdom mixed with magic and technology. Nothing we haven't seen before. I think the biggest fault of the world building is the lack of insight on the Garak race. We know so little about them. We never get a chance to explore their island to get to know what their race is like and what their situation is. We're told it's similar to what the people of Lazarus Island are dealing with, but I believe they should show, not tell. And why does it have to be the same? Why can't it be more different? Why do we never get a Garak party member? It would add insight to life on their island. We do see many Garaks are not violent and war-hungry like Zangarak, but that's it. They don't expand on it. It's such a waste. If you look at a game like Fire Emblem, there is a distinct difference between the two races, a history to their conflict, a reason for their prejudice, and a reason for them to come together. There is nothing like that in the entirety of the last story, and that is one of its biggest faults. Now this is where the game gets a big thumbs up from me. The combat system in this game is awesome. So when combat begins, you'll be given a chance to evaluate the field and see what enemies are where, and this lets you plan out your strategy. During combat, your allies will automatically attack and cast spells, and you are free to attack the enemy with either your sword or your crossbow. Each character follows certain RPG standards. Zale, Dagran, and Seren are physical attackers, Yurik, Miranya, and Callista are your mages, and Lowell uses a mix of magic and physical attacks. There are lines of sight to let you know which character the enemy is targeting. Zale has the power of the Outsider, so when you activate it, all the enemies will target Zale. This allows you to draw attention to yourself to protect allies that are taking too much of a beating, and to allow time for your mages to cast spells. It's such a simple concept, but it works really well here. So many shows and movies show characters protecting someone by drawing the bad guy's attention to themselves. Now you can play it, and it's cool. There's also this gauge at the top left. When it fills up, you can hit up on the D-pad and it brings up a list of skills that each character can use. It creates this mix of real-time and turn-based combat. It's awesome! Because of this, I'm okay with the rest of my party members being AI units. I can still tell them what to do, and I have full range of movement with a fair amount of variety. Your characters learn more skills as they level up, and the further in the game you get, the more awesome it becomes. Towards the end, you get these sweet ultimate attacks that are enabled when you fill up this second gauge, and they kick ass. Combine this gameplay with some fantastic battle music, and combat really shines as the most fun aspect of the game. And there is a lot of combat, so you can have some real fun here. There's also some areas in the game where you can summon monsters to level grind, but it suffers from the same problem as the arena. There is no downside to level grinding. A big part of this is because your party is completely restored after every battle, so nothing is at stake when you level grind because your characters will be at full health in between each grind session. That's the major flaw with the combat though. It's way too easy. I didn't get a game over until the very end of the game. You get 5 lives for each character and have your health restored after each battle, so there's no consequence to battle. In other RPGs, you have to keep track of your resources. You keep an eye on your potions, mana, health, so you're always coming up with a backup plan and determining if you can afford a level grind session or if you need to go back to town and stock up. Here, there's almost nothing to keep track of, which is nice to newcomers, but to RPG veterans like myself, it's a bit too handholdy. You don't really need to grind though. Like I said, the combat is easy. Fun as hell, yes, but easy. Plus, there's a real lack of enemy variety. There are too many giant spiders and it gets really stale. Some of the enemies look really cool, but they are few and far between. Also, the camera can be really frustrating at some points. Luckily for me, I was playing on the Wii's Classic Controller Pro, so the camera was on the other analog stick instead of the D-pad. It would probably be way worse if I was playing with the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck. I also really don't like that Zale is the only playable character. At first I didn't mind, but at different points of the game, you can play as the other characters. In fact, every character other than Miranya is playable at one point, so why the fuck can I not play as whoever I want? If you're going to go through the effort to program the other characters to be playable, then let me choose when I get to play them. Even Final Fantasy XIII let me do this. Wait. Did I just compliment Final Fantasy XIII? Excuse me real quick. Speaking of Final Fantasy XIII, this game also has a weapon upgrading system, but it is far less complicated than that fucking mess. This is simple and to the point, which is fair, and it's cool that our weapons get some extra flair when they are upgraded enough. The combat of this game may be on the easy side, but it's a hell of a lot of fun, and definitely my favorite aspect of the game. This is going to be fairly brief, as there really aren't that many spoilers in the game. One of them is one of the reasons why the characters in this game fail. At one point in the game, Zale and Callista are engaged after Jarrell is put in prison. Callista didn't want to marry Jarrell, so we understand she's happy to be away from him, but is she happy to be with Zale? I have no clue. Sure, they have the lovey eyes for each other, but once they are engaged, they never talk about it. It is never brought up. Zale never asks Callista if she's okay with it. We don't even get confirmation at this point that Zale loves Callista. Everyone just says, "Oh, you love Callista," but there's never a realization or a conversation about it. He just suddenly does. And they have no chemistry. It's like watching two pieces of toast. It's nice that they didn't do that typical will they or won't they bullshit, but just rushing it doesn't work either. So there's that, but what I really want to talk about is the reveal that Dagran is the final villain. At this point of the game, I was wondering why Dagran hadn't been in my party for almost 30 levels, And it would be a nice twist if it wasn't so forced. I love the idea of pitting Dagran and Zale against each other. It's your classic Moses story, and Dagran's motivation to kill General Astar and the burden he feels being responsible for Zale and the others is great in theory, but it's not focused on at all. I know the point of it is to bring up how the rest of the gang didn't know how much their burdens Dagran suffered alone, but you can keep the rest of the characters in the dark while informing the player. Dagran grows more and more distant as the game progresses, but we know so little about him that we don't really care. And we don't see that much of his and Zale's friendship. Most of their time together is just during missions where he is shouting orders, so this tragic turn at the end doesn't hit us as much as it should. Dagran's motivation to take the power of the outsider really doesn't make much sense. He wants the power so he and the gang could make a decent life for themselves. He wants this godlike power to basically be able to make ends meet. That's a pretty extreme reaction. If you don't like mercenary work, you could always get a regular job. Also, with how much Count Arganin wants Zale in the castle and how much he likes Dagran, why wouldn't he just keep them around? Also, at this point in the game, everyone knows that Count Arganin is dead, so that means Callista and Zale will become the new leaders of Lazarus Island. So Zale could obviously bring the rest of the group in the castle. It's just such a convoluted plan for such a simple endgame. Him killing Astar is enough to pit him and Zale against each other, and it's more interesting than this over-the-top godly power shit. Plus, it's really unclear in the last battle if Dagran is himself or if he is under the control of the outsider, so it confuses me as to whether or not Dagran is really too far gone or not. It would be more tragic if Dagran was possessed by the outsider and can only be freed through death. That would make the image of Zale impaling his best friend even more haunting, and it would warrant all the grief at the end. It's not bad, it just suffers from the classic JRPG overcomplication. In almost every way I look at it, The Last Story is just an average RPG. The characters aren't interesting, but not annoying. The music is good, but at times unremarkable. The world is simple, but not engaging. The combat is fun, but easy. And the story is convoluted, but not entirely incomprehensible. It's a complete mixed bag. The final score for The Last Story is a 6 out of 10. In a lot of ways, The Last Story reminds me of Panzer Dragoon Saga. It's an RPG clearly handicapped by its hardware. However, Panzer Dragoon Saga has enough creativity, more interesting characters, and a much better story to make up for its shortcomings. It's really a shame that this is the last major game that Hironobu Sakaguchi worked on. The father of Final Fantasy deserves to go out on a higher note than this. And like I said, it's not awful, it's just very average. I would recommend it to people who want a simple RPG. This is not for RPG veterans though. I'd ask you guys what you think of The Last Story, but since this game has positive reviews on almost every website, I know you're gonna fucking tell me. Well, I'll get ready for your inevitable hate mail. I'm Ranting Spider-Man, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, we need to stop with the humming. It doesn't work.